Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. I want to make sure we share our time on a good way. So I'm going to put my time in so that we'll leave some time for questions and if you have any. You should have received when you walked in a packet and that says estate planning seminar. I wasn't quite sure. I know when Sister Mary called me and I talked to Sister Grant here that it was estate planning, and that's what we're going to be talking about. And that is the area that I've been working in since I retired from the court. But that's the area I've been working in, period. But we'll go from that. I have what a similar, like a little outline that you have in your materials, and I'm going to refer to that now. Can everyone hear? Okay. I know you're here for an estate planning class and a seminar, but does anyone have an idea of what estate planning is all about? No, I'm just saying hello to you. Okay. I saw you walk in, and I said, I looked out there, and I know somebody. Yeah. But anyway, how many of you in here have wills? Okay, that's good. Almost everybody. Well, according to the sheet that you have present in front of you, estate planning involves how an individual assets will be preserved, managed, and distributed after death or in the event they become incapacitated. So that is what estate planning is about. And they're thinking about every 3 years, you should look over your estate plan that you already have present and review it if you need it. And keep all your contacts current. One of the things that is in your packet that I gave you is a estate planning guide or checklist. And it's about 4 pages long, and we're not going to go over that while we're here, but you can take that home, and when you get time, if you don't already have a estate plan or you're in the process of doing one, then you would fill that out and then share it with whoever's going to be doing your estate, if you're updating your will or updating your trust or whatever you may be having. So you may want to do that. Why do you think people need a will? Okay, that's good. Anyone else? Yes. That is the main thing. Eliminate a lot of confusion. I'm working on a case right now that there's a lot of confusion going on. The person left a will, but it's created, even though they left a will, the family doesn't want to go along with what was left in the will. And they may not have a choice because, the will has a person that's going to be directing it. But Well, if you do have a will, it probably will go through probate. The amount of time that it takes to go through probate will be determined on what was in the will and how it was put together. All assets do not go through probate. And those things that do not go through probate, I made a little list of them. So if you have retirement benefits, that does not go through probate because you've already probably assigned a beneficiary to it. And so that keeps it from going through probate. If for some reason you don't have a beneficiary on any of those documents, that's not me. If you don't have a beneficiary listed, that may cause something to go through probate. People thought that they had put a beneficiary on a bank account, which does not go through probate, but it does go through probate if you didn't leave your money to anybody. If you just left it, you have the money just to you, and while you're using it, and if you decide, when you pass, and you didn't put any payable on death or list a beneficiary to receive it, then that will end up being tested in probate. The other thing I just mentioned, the payable on death, if you go to your bank and I just did this last year myself, go to the bank and made payable on death designation so that when anything happened to me, that money would go to the person that's named. Insurance policies and investment accounts are all other things that are non-probate only because you have listed a beneficiary. But if there's no beneficiary, then that's how it's determined. One of the questions I have on the sheet here, is what happens if you do not have an estate plan? What did you say? Oh, what happens if you do not have an estate plan? If you haven't made any arrangements for what's to happen to your assets after you die, what happens to it? Well, that is called, when that happens, it is called you have died intestate. 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 And the process that is used is what we call intestate succession. And really that comes from section of Ohio Revised Code 2105.06. That determines where your assets will go if you did not leave a will. And just let me read a couple of things from that so you will see what happens there. When a person dies intestate, having personal property or real property or an inheritance in this state, we're talking about Ohio, that inheritance would pass parsonary or except otherwise provided by law. In other words, it will pass by whatever the law is written. And the law right now is, and they haven't changed it anytime soon, if a person dies, if there is no surviving spouse, everything goes to the children. That is, if you didn't have a will. That's the first one. Also, if there is a spouse and one or more children, then in that case, the whole goes to the surviving spouse. She gets everything because the children are hers and the decedents, and so that would make sense, so she would get that. Another scenario is if there is a spouse and one child of the decedent, lineal descendants, that's people that would be following of that particular child. The surviving spouse is not the natural or adoptive parent of the decedent's child. In that case, she would get the first $20,000 of the estate plus 1/2 of the balance of the intestate estate, and the remainder would go to the children. So they would still have to make some determination as to what you have. The wife would get $20,000 off the top, and then the balance will be divided between her and the children that are left. That's also in the case if the child is not the child of the decedent, or not of the surviving spouse, but as a child of the decedent. If there are no children, everything goes to the surviving spouse. If there are no children and no surviving spouse, everything will go to the surviving parents if they're living. So that would be the next thing. And it goes on down the list. If you want to look at that, it's section 2105.06, and it goes down very different sections. It can even, after if there are no children, no spouse, it goes to the brothers or sisters of the decedent. If there are no brothers or sisters of the decedent, it goes to the next person would be the paternal grandparents. And then from that point on, if it doesn't have anybody, then it goes to the state of Ohio. Yes. 2105, start 2105.06, that's the beginning of it. And there are A, B, C, D, up down to K sections of that. And each one starts with the surviving spouse, then it goes to when there are children, when there are no children, and then if there are no children, no spouse, then it goes to the sisters and brothers. If there's no sisters and brothers, then it goes to the grandparents, and therefore. So you see, it's important that you would try to have a will and have that kind of outline what you are looking for in what you would want your family to have in terms of what you have for your property. One of the things that it's on the sheet that I've given out to you that you would have in your last will and testament, since most of you have wills, a will is I'll try to stay up here then. A will is a bare minimum that you want to leave in your estate plan. You will name an executor, and that's very important. The reason you name an executor, and when I do wills, I tell people, before I do them, I said, think of who you would like to leave as to administer your will. And that person should be someone you trust and someone who you know will follow what you put in your will. I had a lady that I did a will for last month, and she wanted to be, she was a military person, and she wanted to have a military funeral, and she wanted burial at that Richmond cemetery. But she said, my sister told me that she was not going to she was not going to give me a military funeral. And she said, everything is paid for. The military pays for everything, so they don't have to worry about that. But she didn't want to drive out to Richmond for the burial. So I told her, well, then you need to look at if that's the person you want to serve as your executor, because you want whoever it is to follow your wishes. And sometimes those kind of wishes, and Mary will be talking about that, are put together earlier in a plan that you have for your funeral, and you know, what happens when you die, how you know, what church you want to be buried at, who you want to be on your funeral program, and those kind of things. That's something separate from a will. You don't have to put that in a will. In fact, it won't make any sense to put it in the will, because the will is usually looked at 2 or 3 weeks after you've passed, and you may have been already placed in the ground and everything, and if you wanted to do something special, it won't happen because you've already been taken care of. So something like that should be put in some notes, or to a letter, or to your family and your friends, or whoever you choose to help you, so that they will know this is what you wish to have done. So that is very important. Some people worry about whether or not the will get contested. I've had people tell me, I don't want my will contested. And you really can't say that won't happen. If one of your people that you leave stuff to is upset and don't like what you left them, they may want to contest it if they feel they should have gotten more, or they should have gotten all of whatever you left, or they don't like who you put in your will, or whatever like that. So wills will be contested in some cases, not all the time, but they are. But one of the things I tell the clients that I've had that worry about that, I tell them that if this is what you want for your children or whoever you are selecting to put in your will to leave an asset, if you could put a clause in there that says something to the effect that if they do not go along with the gift that you've given them, then they lose that gift, and it goes as though they had preceded you in death. And so that's not the legal terms that is used, but it takes care of those things. I had a lady that told me she left a lot of things to her children, but she said if they don't like what I left them, then if they contest the will, then they lose everything. And that's your choice. And she was going to share that with them so they would know that, and if they plan on contesting. But in her case, I think she left them with some sizable assets, and that probably would not happen. But that is one of the reasons when you prepare your estate plan, you prepare it with the professional so that they can talk about the issues that may arise with whether someone may not like what you left them, or don't like how you left anything. They want it all, or they either wanted something particular. My thinking is that if you tell people in your family, if it's something that they want or they like, give it to them before you pass. You give it to them, and then that way they got it, and they know they got it, and they don't have to worry about getting something else. And you can still give them whatever else you want to give them, but that way they'll know that, and it may make you feel a little better, about what you have given them. So that is something you need to dress about. As we go through the estate planning, what are the instruments of estate planning? Now, we said a last will and testament is one of them. And the key thing there is that if you have minor children, you want to appoint a guardian and in your will. for those children, so that you would be able to have someone that you trust that will take care of your minor children if they're still minors when you pass, that is in the way that you want them to be taken care of. You definitely would want to appoint an executor, and the executor should be someone that you trust, that you feel that will do as you have set down with them. And I always tell people, when you do the will, share it with the executor. You know, don't put their names in a will and then don't tell them that they're the executor, because then they won't know what you really wanted. You know, if they've talked with you and know about you, they will decide, you know, I know that Sister Mary Jane, she wanted this to happen, and so I'm going to make sure that it does. And Mary, I didn't want to just use your name up, but it came up. Anyway, just find out who your beneficiaries are. You know who they are and who you want to have them as part of those persons that you're going to leave something to. You can also leave things to your church. A lot of people make those kind of testaments. So they give something to the church. They give something to organization. That becomes a charitable kind of gift. It can be placed in the will, or it could be placed in some other kind of document like a trust, if that's what you want to do, a charitable trust. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The other thing is that some people, when you're doing an estate plan, a lot of people do a power of attorney. Now let me tell you about a power of attorney, because I had an issue come up with that too. Power of attorneys are only valid while you're living. So you can't, you can have a power of attorney, but after you pass, it is no longer valid. And I have an issue now with a family that had a power of attorney. The woman died, and one of her daughters went to a bank with the power of attorney to withdraw the money. Well, they knew her. They had seen her before, and they knew that this lady, but she did not tell them that her mother had passed. So she went there and she withdrew the funds, and they gave them to her. And the issue now is that it's going to be in the courts, because it was not something that they were supposed to get, and they know that they found out later when the executor of the lady's estate came to the bank, presented her documentation that she was the executor. She finished the death certificate, and she said, I want the funds so that I could put them in an estate account. And they said, well, they're gone. They've been taken. She said, well, she died. And he said, well, she must have just died. He said, no, she died a month ago. And in that case, and it was very sad. So I haven't found out what's going to happen there, but I'm pretty sure that, one, the bank will have to turn whatever was taken out over to the estate, and the probate court will work with that. And then the insurance, because the money was insured, I'm sure they will pay that to the estate. And I'm pretty sure that right after that, they'll probably go look to the individual who took the money without proper authority and look for repayment. So I'm not saying anything to the family members about that, because when it happens, but they will know that, and we'll go from there. So a power of attorney is good to have. So if you are becoming of age and you feel like you want someone to help you with your financial decisions, that you may at some point in time not know how to go to the bank, and you want them to go to the bank and withdraw money on your behalf, that's why you would have a durable power of attorney for finance, you would have that. But as I said before, it's no longer valid after you pass. But in either case, you want to make sure whoever you select for your power of attorney, that that person is someone that you trust and know. And you can change those. Those with the power of attorney, you can change it every year if you want to. If that's something you want to do, you just revoke the power and then put in another person's name, and then send those documents to wherever you do business with, financial business, so that they will know and they will have it on file. Another estate planning document is the durable power of attorney for health care or advanced health care directive. And I know that I go to Cleveland Clinic, and that's one thing they ask every time I go. Do you have your directives, your advanced healthcare directive? They want that done. And basically what it does is it lets them know, so lets the doctors know, and it also helps your family to know what you feel about your health, and if it gets into a situation where you no longer can make decisions about what kind of health care you want to have. It means that you name an attorney, in fact, to do that, and they know, because you've talked with them about, if I should get to a point where I can't make my own decisions, this is what I want. I don't want to be resuscitated. I don't want to have any nutrition, or I want you to keep me alive as long as you can. So, so that, that may be the case, but they won't know that unless you've talked that over with them. And that's one of the things that's on the directive, that unless the hospital know, the doctors know what your plans are. And in some cases, that is also called a living will, if you've heard of living wills, because a living will just basically tells everybody else what you want to happen if you get to the point where there's no hope for you. The doctors have said all hope is gone, as far, only with God's help you may be able to survive. But you have to you tell them that if I get in this position or this state, I don't want to be kept alive. So take me off the machine, unplug the machine, and let me die naturally. Just go ahead and pass away. But they won't know that and won't do that unless you've made that in a living will. And it's that same clause can be put in a healthcare directive. In fact, most of the most recent ones have that clause there, and they make everyone who has done it initial it and date it, so that they will know that they did this on such and such a date, and when they did it, they knew that they wanted to be taken off any kind of resuscitation and things of that nature. So that's the living wills, and you can read all about some of these as you get ready to and at home and working on your own estate plan. And another document, of course, is guardianships, and that's something while you're living, and especially you get to a point where your health declines and you need to have someone to make decisions for you. But it's not that you're dying, but you just need someone to make decisions for you because your health has failed, and you want to let the courts make a decision about what happens with your living arrangements and your health care and all of that. You name a conservator or you name a guardian, and that person has to apply with the probate court, and you become one of their cases, and a report is made. The guardian makes the report to the probate court approximately every 2 years, It's a written report about the finances. It's about the state of mind of the person, that the guardian, and so forth. So it's important, and I've done those before, but it is a lot of work, and a lot of people have done it when their parents or their loved one has been put in a nursing home, and because of whatever the situation is, they can't make decisions on their own, but they're still living and still doing on, but their finances and their wherewithal for their estate has to be taken over by somebody who has a little bit more authority. I'm going to stop here for a minute and see if you have any questions. I put my timer on, and I have about 8 minutes before I stop. Yes. Yeah, you're online, so they can hear it.
My question has to do with, if you own no property, like say houses or anything like that, would you still need to have a will?
If you own property?
If you do not own property?
Like I said, a lot of people, most people that definitely have property have a will, or they should have one. But you have other assets that if they're not something that you've left with the beneficiary's name on it, then that may be something you want to place in a will.
Something like a automobile
Autos,
or a boat.
you don't need you don't really need a will for an automobile if that's all you have, unless you wanted to go to a specific person, and they're not near you or by you, so that you put it in a will so that when it's read, they'll know that they'll get your car. Yes, Mary? Oh.
I just need clarification. You said when a person dies, that the power of attorney no longer exists. What exactly do you mean? I guess I'm not really clear about what you said.
Oh, well, the power of attorney, that has no more effect, because the power of attorney is while that person is living, that they want whoever that attorney in fact is, the agent that they've appointed, to do go to the bank, cash checks, make deposits, make withdrawals, anything that you may do as an individual yourself. They give that person the authority to do that. And if that person dies, then your
saying if the
job
person
is over with. You don't have to
Okay,
do
you're
that.
saying if I had, my mother had given me a power of attorney, then I passed away, it would no longer be in effect.
Yours has no longer in effect.
If my mother had given me power of attorney in writing, and then I pass away, it's no longer in effect.
Right, because
okay.
you're not present either. So it's only for people who are living. So the person that is living has to, the person who is the power of attorney has to be living, and the person who grants that power has to be living as well. If either one of you die, then the power of attorney, the actual document, is no longer in effect. It doesn't have any value whatsoever. So, and like I said, in the case that I was sharing with you, it was a daughter that had the power of attorney, and that's normal that her mother would give her the power of attorney. But she misused the power when her mother passed. She went to the bank, they know her, they knew who she was, so they didn't really ask any questions. She went there and she withdrew some money from the account, and not until the executor of the estate went to the bank to get what funds they had to put in the estate account, and when they were told that there's no money, and she said, well, why isn't there? She said, I see that there's some withdrawals here after she died. And then they looked at the death certificate, and they saw that the withdrawal took place about 2 or 3 weeks after the lady had passed. So, like I said, nothing, we haven't found out what's going to happen there, but it's, I just said by law, something's going to happen to the bank will have to pay the estate whatever was in it that was withdrawn illegally, and because they're insured, that means that the estate will get what they were supposed to get. But because it was insured, I mean, I'm pretty sure the insurance company is going to go after the person, in this case the daughter, unless she returns the money to them before they take any legal action. But that may not happen because knowing that particular person, she doesn't seem to be of the mindset that she's going to go and do anything. Yes.
People have a joint bank account and one should pass away, would the survivors still have access to that account, or would they have to go through some legal steps to continue to get access to that account?
If that person is payable on death, like you go to the bank and you name the people that would receive after you pass, the bank will give them all of the money that is if their name if their name is listed, because I know some people who have to name their children, so their children can go and they'll be able to get that money. It doesn't go through probate. Even if they left a will, it'll go directly to them. The check will be made out by the bank to that person because it says payable on death. And so usually it's good to tell people that have bank accounts, just check it out, because maybe the person you named may have passed on themselves, or you've made a decision that you want somebody else to receive whatever you have. So just every now and then, I would think that we said every 3 years, take a look at what you have and make a change if necessary, or just make sure you have peace of mind knowing that where the selections you made, those are the ones you want to keep.
Excuse me. Would your executor be responsible for your debts?
No. They will receive all your debts. And the attorney that you get, because one of the cases I have now, I get letters from the creditors, and they're saying that this person that died owed them so much money. And they keep saying, you don't have to pay it because it's for the estate to pay. And what they have to do is file a claim against the estate with the probate court. So in most cases, those that I have received a death claim for, they have filed with the court. So the court has a record of it, and because of that, before you complete the administration of that estate claim has to be dealt with by the court. So either the court will pay it from whatever assets the estate has, and when you do an estate, you have to do an inventory of everything that the decedent had, including property. If there's, like I said, the insurance and the bank accounts, if they have beneficiaries, don't come under that, but they have cars, any property, that has to be. In the one case I have now, the magistrate has already told us that since there's so many claims against the estate that have been sent in by the creditors, that if there's any property in the estate and there is a house, it's going to have to be sold if the people don't come up with the money. And I'm sure the family, because they're saying they want to keep the house, but they're not going to be able to keep it if they can't make cost of the debts. One of the debts is about $20,000 for a car that the decedent owned. And then some others had some credit cards that have amounts on $14,000. So it's just a lot of things. But what I tell everybody, and I told them, that the court can decide whether they pay the full amount for the debt that is owed, or they will pay so much on the dollar. When my brother passed, he owed some debts, and in fact, he had more debts than he had money. And I kept getting these notices that you don't have to pay the debt. Let the estate. Well, his estate didn't have any money. He had insurance policies, and those were given out to those persons who he had insurance. He left most of the stuff to his mother, and as he wasn't married. But so she didn't have to take her money from the insurance policy, because insurances don't come under probate. So the estate ended up being what they call insolvent, didn't have any money, and he had about $10,000 or $15,000 in debt, credit cards and things like that. And the court erased all of it. They said 50 cents on the dollar, and it wasn't even 50 cents on the dollar to even pay that. So everybody, in most cases, the debtors, the creditors, they didn't even bother to come to the hearing, because they kind of knew when they found out they didn't have any money that they weren't going to get anything. So all of his debts were wiped out. And but the family didn't get anything either, because there wasn't anything. Those who had gotten it through the insurance company. So
My question, just recently I've become a millennial, and I use Facebook and Instagram, and there's a lot of discussion about using a trust versus a will.
Oh, yes, I didn't get a chance to talk about the trust. Trusts are a little bit more, well, the things with the trust, they continue on after you have passed. Even beyond the will, a trust can continue on. For example, if you leave trust to a child or a minor, and you have named a successor trustee, after you may be the trustee of that account, but then after you pass, you name someone who would take it in stead. That could be a bank, it could be an institution, it could be another individual. Whether you did that or not, they would take and make distributions to the person that is the recipient or the beneficiary of the trust. And that's why they continue on. You may see people's name, when sometimes there are some programs on TV, and they say the trust family, the living trust family of such and such a person. And that's fine. But as I tell people when they do a trust is not like a will, because it takes more time and more language that has to be put in it to make sure that it fits the laws of the state. And you may end up paying, where you may pay $300 or $400 for a will, you may pay $4,000 or $5,000 for a trust. And but it will last beyond your whatever you've put together. It could last almost into perpetuity. If it depends on what your trust is about, and if it goes to children who are minors, once they become of age, then that trust may become of age, and then that will end at that point. The successor trustee will turn it over to all the funds in it. He will make distributions. He may make distributions prior to help people in terms of their payments. Say you want your child to get $10,000 or $15,000 a year as they grow older, and then when they get of age, they'll get everything that's left. And so that's how sometimes they last longer than that. And then some are, like I said, in perpetuity because of who they're given to. They may not be to a person, it may be to an institution, and that institution will continue to receive a distribution on a yearly basis based on whatever is in the terms of the trust. So that's something it's something to think about, and some people like those, and that's important. So, and I got to do one next week, and I'm not looking forward to it, but yeah, it will pay off, I guess, and for me financially, but still, it's a lot, and I tried to talk the person out of it, but they said, no, I don't want a will. I got a will. I want a trust, and my son is down in Cincinnati, and I want him to after I'm gone to come and just take over everything and to do what I need to have done, and so we'll put it together.
This is our last question.
This is really a follow-up to this lady's question here. I didn't quite understand it, so I'm going to use an example.
Okay.
So Billy and I have a joint account, and Billy dies. Who gets the money in our joint account?
Billy and you have a
That's correct.
okay. A joint account. Billy would get the money.
Billy dies.
Oh no, okay. You would get it.
Okay, so I don't have to have a power of attorney in that case. All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Let's give Attorney Bryant a hand, please. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I'll be around. I'm not going.
She said she'll be around, so if you have other questions, you may see her. But at this time, our next presenter will come forth, and most of you know who she is. Most of you know who she is. Sister Mary J. Smith. And you know what? You know she's employed by E.F. Board and Sons, which is right across the street. So at this time, Sister Annie Bell will be passing out her literature that she has presented and brought to you today. So let's give Sister Mary J. Smith a hand.
Good evening, everyone. Well, tonight we are going to work. Attorney Bryant was easy on you. In your folders, you have our PowerPoint presentation, which we will go through, and you have an ink pen, which there's no excuse not to take notes. And also, in each folder, there should be a magnifier in case you forgot your glasses. For the last 20 years, I've worked for Boyd Funeral Home doing advanced planning, but I've been an insurance agent since 1981. And in that time, I was actually licensed to do advanced planning, advanced funeral planning, pre-planning, whatever you want to call it, but I didn't do it until recently. And by recent, I mean the last 20 years. And it is something that is so important. And to reiterate some of the things that Attorney Bryant talked about, this would make it a lot easier if you took these baby steps, which we're doing tonight, because there are like 133 things that you have to do when somebody dies. Sometimes you might only have a week to make a lot of decisions that might be expensive, and you really, just putting things in place. So if we can put our slides up. Why should we pre-plan? Why should we do it? If we can go to that slide, a guide to funeral pre-planning. We want to make certain that our wishes are fulfilled. And that's very important, because you'd be surprised that sometimes people will pass away and nobody knows what they want. Alleviating the financial burden of funeral costs and making sound decisions that can really lessen the stress. I'd like to go back to the first one. My sister passed away in 2004. She had a long-term illness, and I asked her and her 2 adult daughters if we could all meet, sit down, and talk about what she wanted. Now, I knew she wanted to be cremated. Nobody in my family was ever cremated. Some people look on cremation as a taboo, but that's what she wanted. And we wanted to make sure that her wishes were fulfilled. So in February of 2004, we sat down as a family and talked about it. And I said, because you're a believer, I know we will have a church service. And we did. We had a beautiful church service with flowers, beautiful picture of her, but she was cremated because she did not want anybody to view her in a casket. Next slide, please. Now, I've broken this down into sections, and I hope you'll take notes as we go along. And if you have questions as we go along, please stop, raise your hand. For those who are sitting here, I don't know if you can put questions in the chat. Can we? Can we put questions in the chat tonight or online? Okay. Things to do. These are people we have to notify. That very first one, talk with a trusted loved one. Put 2 checks next to that sentence, because somebody has to know what you want to have done when you pass away. It can't be guesswork. Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to go be shipped down south so you can be with your loved ones? Somebody needs to know that. One of the biggest arguments I ever saw in the funeral home was mama's glasses off or on. Off or on. I want them off. I want them on. I want them off. I want them on. We finally had to separate the families until everybody calmed down, because that was a big thing to them. I want my mama's glasses on because she wore glasses every day. Trusted loved one. And I can't say that enough. Trusted loved one. Because sometimes if a person is the beneficiary on your insurance policy and they decide not to use it for your funeral, they can do that because it's their money. They are the ones who will be receiving that benefit. So they should know what you want. Your doctor, notifying the doctor, you can put a check mark next to that. Your trusted loved one should know who your doctor is, because the doctor has to sign off on the death certificate. If he doesn't, it won't get done. Funeral director. There are over 26 funeral homes and funeral services on the east side of Cleveland that services our community. So you have many choices of people that you could select to service you as a funeral director. If you don't have good vibes, or if you notice something that you don't like, you can make another choice. Even after you have called that funeral home to make certain that, that person might be picked up. But you would want to do that ahead of time because you don't want to pay any additional money. So do your homework. I always suggest to somebody, because unless a funeral is private, you can go observe how a funeral home treats a family. Are they greeting at the door? Are they smiling and nice to everybody? Or are they just standing around? I mean, you'd be surprised. Clergy church, check mark. Now, many of us in here belong to Olivet, so we might know the protocols. But if you don't, you should know the church protocol. Who do I call if someone in my family passes away and I want to have a service here at the church? Will I have to get another clergy person? Will I have to have music? Will I have to have a soloist? I've had people ask me, can you have Ivory sing at my service? No, I don't think I can do that, but you can put that in your wishes. So you should know what goes on with the church and the clergy. Many churches now are charging a facilities charge just to use the church, to have a funeral service. And that's because of the times we're living in. You know, some churches have been closed, so they don't have the funds like they used to. Some have to hire outside security or janitors in order to do the work. You want to make sure that you will be serviced properly. Insurance agent. When Attorney Bryant, and put a check mark next to that, talk to your insurance agent so you'll know what type of insurance you have. We've had situations where someone will pass away and they find out they have term insurance that ends at a certain time, and it was over with long before the funeral came around. Do I have whole life? Do I have term? And the worst thing that can happen is someone will bring you a policy and it's accident coverage. Unless somebody dies in an accident, it's not valid. So you should be able to talk to your insurance agents, and there are thousands licensed insurance agents in the state of Ohio. So you have a lot of choices, a lot of companies, and you want to make sure you're dealing with someone who's reputable. Unions and fraternal organizations, put a check mark. Some unions have a provision that will pay if their members pass away. You may get between $300 and $500, which could be used for part of the funeral service expense. Some fraternal organizations have those same type of coverage, and even banks. Some banks have term insurance that they have with your account. And I've heard people say, well, I didn't know I had that, and they go home and they look and they discover they have a $3,000 term insurance policy that's still in effect as long as you're living, and you can make a claim on it once somebody passes away. We know what Social Security is. You know that once you put that Social Security number in the computer, it's over with. So you want to make sure that they're notified. Pension plans and human resources. Put a couple of check marks there. Sometimes when people either retire or maybe they've changed positions, they haven't checked thoroughly with their human resources departments to see what benefits might travel with them or might be over with if you no longer have that job. Or you could age out of the insurance. Sometimes when you turn a certain age, that insurance might have been $50,000, it might drop down to $25,000. There are people who work for the government, say if you're a postal worker, under their retirements, there are times when that policy might drop down to a flat amount. You got to make sure that you have a beneficiary on your pension plan and any type of insurance that you have. And the Veterans Administration, if you've ever had dealings with them, veterans have certain entitlements. An honorably discharged veteran has certain entitlements. They'll be entitled to a free burial, free vault, free headstone, and free military honors if they're honorably discharged. It also extends to the spouse of that veteran. They can be buried either on top or they can go in the grave space first. Whoever dies first gets buried first. There used to be a time when they would bury the ex-wives, but they cut that out. It was a big to-do. Next slide, please. Where it says select. When you're doing pre-planning, you might think about what you want, like my sister did. She wanted to be cremated. And as I said, nobody in my family had ever been cremated. And sometimes people still look upon cremation as a taboo. But cremations now are over 50% of funeral services in the United States. When my sister died in 2004, it was only like 20%. Do you have a question? Yes. The question was, can you be buried without being embalmed? Yeah, if you, no, well, that's not true. They do have what's known as the green burials. It's called a green burial, which means, and I hate to be morbid here, but the person is wrapped. They're not embalmed, and they're put directly into the ground. That's called a green burial.
Is it based on religion, or it's just can anyone have
No,
that?
it's not based on religion. There are some religions that have a practice where they don't want you embalmed. We've heard it in the Jewish community. We've heard it in the Muslim community, where they will have a ceremony where they, with the Muslims, they wash and wrap you in, but they casket you and put you in what they call sacred ground. But in fact, I got a call today. There's a cemetery down in southeast Ohio called Fox Hill, Foxhill, if anybody wants to check into it. Fox Hill Cemetery does green burials. And they do, you take the person to the gravesite, and usually it's very, the family usually carries the body to the, yes, usually, but as a funeral home, we have taken people to Fox Hill, yes. Now, if you are going to be viewed, you must be embalmed, because that's the law. And plus, nothing is worse than an unembalmed body.
What do you mean by that?
Embalmed? That's a
No.
preservative, that's what,
Unembalmed.
if you're unembalmed, that means that preservative has not been injected into you to preserve that body. But you cannot have an unembalmed body and have a viewing, because it's not really a good thing. Any other questions on that part of it? So just to reiterate, there are cemeteries that have green burials where you don't have to be embalmed. It would, they put the bodies there wrapped, and there is a term for it, but I'm not a funeral director. I'm an insurance agent. And they put the bodies directly into the ground. And as I understand it, it takes about a year for that body to deteriorate. Unlike an embalmed body that's put in a casket, that's put in a vault, it might last years and years. When Medgar Evers was disinterred after 25 years, he was pretty well intact. They were able to do the autopsy on his body because there was a lot left there, because he was in a Batesville casket and a Clark vault. He was top of the line.
Sister Mary,
Yes,
if someone wants to be cremated and that when they die, the family says no, is there something they can sign and if they have it verified, the funeral home have to follow the family or the deceased person?
it all depends. If you do pre-planning, and that's one of the good things, is having your wishes fulfilled. You sign it's a legal document. It's a disposition of the body. And if I sign it that I want to be cremated, the funeral home has to cremate me. You can't change it. That's one of the things about pre-planning. You get your wishes fulfilled. It has to be documented. Because it's nothing worse than having an argument about what you're going to do with someone when they do pass away, if they're going to be cremated or if they're going to be buried. They're both, if you have funeral services, they're all funeral services. They're all memorial services because a body is the remains. The cremated remains are also remains. So that's what's remaining there, for the funeral service. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Melton has a question. Doretha?
A quick question. Let's say that I want to be cremated. However, I want to have a full service and also be viewed prior to the cremation.
That's an excellent question. If you want to, there are basically 3 types of cremation services. There's a direct cremation where there's no service. The person is brought to the funeral home and cremated. And those cremated remains are generally given back to the family. You can have cremation with a memorial service, which is also a direct cremation, where the person is cremated and they have a full service. That's what we had for my sister. Cremation service, where you're embalmed, dressed, viewed by the public, and you are put into a rental casket, because you won't need that casket after the service, and then you'll be cremated afterwards. Is that clear? I thought I saw another hand up.
For instance, to Case Western, do you get the body afterwards?
When someone donates their body to science or to the university, that all has to be done ahead of time. You actually do a contract between you and that institution. There's nothing left. There's nothing, but you can still have a memorial service. You just won't have a body there. But your family won't get any kind of remains because that body has been donated to science. You can, however, donate organs. You've heard of organ donations. We all remember when Stephanie Tubbs Jones passed away, and there were 58 people who benefited by the fact that she donated her organs after she was deceased. Does that answer? Is that clear? Okay. The next item on the select list is cemetery property. We've already covered Fox Hill, which is a green burial, but cemeteries vary just like any other type of funeral process. We have the beautiful historical Lakeview Cemetery where graves start at about $4,000. It all depends on where you are. If you buy the waterfall, it might be 10. If you go into the mausoleum or into an above-ground crypt, it might be even more than that. But it is a historic cemetery, and it's private. Our city cemeteries like Highland Park, and I'm kind of sticking with the east side of Cleveland because I think almost all of us are on the east side, they're handled by the city of Cleveland. So those graves are much less. You're talking $1,000. Both of those cemeteries require that you have an outer burial container or a vault. We do have cemeteries, however, in town where you don't have to have a vault. And one of them is on the east side, Evergreen, on Northfield Road. If you have a metal casket, it doesn't have to have an outer burial container. The next item on our list, casket or urn. Now, caskets can go anywhere from a pine box to that fine mahogany that might cost you about 24 grand. Or you can have metal that'll be real thin, almost like cardboard, up to something that's made out of bronze or copper. And They can be really, really nice. When Michael Jackson passed away, he had what was known as the Promethean bronze. The casket cost $25,000. When George Floyd passed away a few years later, it's $37,500. So you can see that caskets are like any other type of merchandise. It just all depends if you want an Escort or a Cadillac, glass top, or something like what Whitney Houston had, which was it was made out of platinum. But it was all, I call it a fingerprint magnet, because they dusted that thing all day long through it. Every time somebody would pass, they were doing this. Urns are the same way. Urns aren't those little cardboard boxes. Urns can go up to be made out of bronze or a really expensive metal. The same way with, usually when you receive cremated remains from the crematory, they're in a corrugated bag and boxed. You can bury those the way they are, or you can put them in an urn. And urns come in all types of things now. They have beautiful glass sculptures and marble and woods and camouflage and Brown's football team or the Cavaliers. You can have whatever you want. I've seen, I received some kind of notice about cremated remains could even be blown out in fireworks now. We've heard of water burials with, people sprinkling ashes into the water or sprinkling them in a sprinkling section, but they're doing everything. And people have jewelry where they'll have a little bit of the cremated remains in their necklaces, the bracelets, rings, whatever you think you might want. Checkmark vault or outer burial container. As I said earlier, some cemeteries require them and some don't. But if they require them, it's just like that casket. You can get a very basic concrete liner, or you can get what James Brown had, one of those solid bronze vaults that cost $16,000. Checkmark programs. In pre-planning, you can get your program material together as early as you want. Gather photos, do your writings, look for poems, and things to go into the service. Now with the church, with this church, we know that we have a format. And everyone doesn't have a format. What we usually provide our families with is a template for Christian burial. Old Testament, New Testament, whoever's doing the eulogy, all of that stuff is outlined on the program. But our church has their own format. So that's something, too, that needs to be checked with your church. Programs can be as elaborate or as simple as you want. I've seen them all the way from 2 pages, 4 pages, to a book, a hardbound book, because it's a keepsake. And one thing I don't understand, people will put thousands of pictures, but nobody knows who the people are on the pictures except maybe a few people in the family. I saw a beautiful program, though, that they did put in a book, and they identified people. To me, that was a real keepsake, a piece of history, a family history that people could really use. The next thing, clothing. If you are going to be viewed, you have to be clothed. You have to be clothed from the inside out. And the reason why I mention clothing, I had a lady who brought in a beautiful ball gown, and she said, I want something to go with this. She was talking about the dress. So we had to find her a casket to go with the dress. She was pre-planning. And she said, this dress will be hanging in my closet until it's time. I've only worn it one time. It was on a cruise. I probably will never wear it again, so I said I can use it for my funeral. It was a beautiful beaded gown. And clothing doesn't have to be a suit or a dress. We had a young lady who was buried in a complete Cavaliers outfit, including the high-top tennis shoes and the knee-high socks, and she had on her jersey. Hair. If your hair has to be done, the embalmer will take care of that for you, or they'll call in a hairdresser. And it could be anything from as simple as my haircut, or if you want color, braids, any type of special hairdo, but it costs. Flowers, checkmark flowers. I really can't say this, but I'm going to say it. I always like it when people say, instead of flowers, donate to a charity. Because those flowers, once they get to the cemetery and they leave them out there, they just throw them out. And because most nursing homes and facilities aren't taking the flowers anymore, ever since COVID, a lot of things have changed. So they don't bother with taking them. But I think they look beautiful, you know, if you have the family spray and special flowers that you would want. Pre-planning is whatever you want, making my wishes known. And if my family decides I want 25 different pieces of floral arrangements, so be it. It's up to me. Place for the funeral, place for visitation. Now we have a church. My sister's service was at her church because those were her wishes, and we followed her wishes. I would love to have my service at my church. But there are some people who have had services at the yacht club, and we even had some that had it at a bar. It's whatever you want. And you can also have it at the funeral home. Most funeral homes have a facility. Can we go to the next slide, please? I wrote these down because the very first thing where it says vital statistics, Sonny, Baldy, Lightning, Snag, and Bill. Those are my father and his brothers. Those were the names they were known by. You can't put that on a death certificate. It's not your government name. You gotta have your government name, your social security number, and your date of birth. They all have to match. If they don't, it'll delay you being able to process any business or file that will at the time. And I've seen people who will use not necessarily a nickname, but they never liked their first name, so they didn't use it. But if it doesn't match what your social security number says and the date of birth, now the computer kicks everything right out. My dad was born on May 14th, 1918. May 7th, 1918. The government had him born May 14th, 1918, because the midwife didn't file the birth certificate till a week after. Did you have something to say? When they mix up on the dates? Yeah, my father he would celebrate both birthdays, so he said they gave him two, so he's celebrating two. The vital statistics, the date of birth, the social security number, the proper name, where a person is born, the name of the father, the mother, the mother's maiden name, if there are any siblings, all of that information goes into the computer for vital statistics. And if something is wrong on that death certificate, it has to be corrected by affidavit. And you really don't, you know, people get very upset. Well, why can't they just type it over? I said, that's, you know, now you have to have an affidavit to do the correction. So you should try to get everything correct before you start. Yes?
Ask people to find out where your, you need to know what the real name is, but some of them don't know the cousin's name.
You know what, I always, when I'm doing a pre-arrangement, I always ask the spelling of each name that they give me, if they give me a middle name. And I said, is that what's on your Social Security? Because Social Security number and that name have to match. So usually I don't have too many problems. But if somebody has not pre-planned and they might not get the information till right at that time, then, you know, there's some research that has to be done. I call a death certificate like a reverse birth certificate because it has basically the same information. Contact information for people who must be notified. Now, in pre-planning, this is very important because your family wants to know who they should contact if you pass away because they would want to come pay their respects. I had a lady who had problems with her eyes. So, like maybe once a year, and she lived about 10 years, she would call me up and she would give me people to add to the list or take off the list. And I kept them for her in the file. It was fine. You know, I was happy to do that for her. And, you know, because I asked her one time, well, why don't you have your daughter do this? She said, well, I'd rather you do it. I'll know where it is. The same way with pictures. I have pictures of people, you know, who have things that they want to go in their programs. That's all about pre-planning. You get what you want. I can't emphasize that enough. Nothing is worse than making a call to give somebody funeral arrangements and they don't know that the person has died. One of my aunts, when my father died, I called her up. I said, Aunt Johnny, I want you to know the funeral is going to... She said, whose funeral? And I felt so bad because I thought somebody else had called her. But it's always good to have that information so that your family knows where it is. And the same thing, arrangements for out-of-town relatives and visitors, it's my understanding that some hotels still give bereavement rates. And even some of the airlines, will give bereavement rates. They had cut it out because, people would take advantage of the fact that they could get a bereavement rate. But, you know, they're still around. Can we go to the last slide, please? It's always good to have your finances in place when you're doing advanced planning. First one on the list there is assignment of an insurance policy. And that's why I said you should know what your insurance is. You can't assign a term policy or an accident policy or something that's been borrowed on so much. Why would you want to do it? It won't be worth anything when the time comes. Pre-need insurance payment plans are, I think you mentioned about trust. And that's what these are. Monies go into an insurance trust, so that money will be there when the time comes to pay for the funeral. And you can not only pay for the funeral in advance, but you can pay for the cemetery, you can pay for the headstone. Everybody has a payment plan in advance. Most funeral homes are not in the financing business when somebody passes away. Because, how are you going to collect that money? Were there any other questions? that's an excellent question. If a funeral home goes out of business, all funeral homes are monitored by not only the state, but the Ohio Funeral Directors Association. So, and I'll use this as an example because it was all in the newspapers. When Wills went under, people were so worried, and it wasn't a lot that was involved in that. We got some of Will's business because those policies that they had paid for were in a trust. So all the person had to do was transfer it to another funeral home, because the Attorney General is the one who makes that determination if that funeral home is going to stay in business after that. And they couldn't stay in business because of some other reasons. But funeral homes are monitored like insurance companies. If an insurance company changes hands or goes out of business, you can always track them through the state if they're licensed to, do business in the state of Ohio. And every state is different. One last thing I would like to mention is the term transportation, because there are times when people want to be transported out of town, or you might pass away out of town and you have to get back home. Transportation can be prearranged also. They put in an allowance for an airfare. You would have to be serviced wherever you pass away, because you cannot bring an unembalmed body across state lines. They would either have to be cremated or embalmed, and a funeral home can take care of all of that for you. But in the pre-planning state, there are sometimes when I have families who know they want to go back to Alabama to be buried. So transportation is something very important to think about. And I think that's it.
Oh, okay.
Is that
She's
enough
done.
to get
Any
you
other
started?
questions? Thank you, Sister Mary J. Smith. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I want to say thank you to Attorney Juanita Bryant, Sister Mary J. Smith. I want to thank my brother in the back who's monitoring the communication and media, my brother Jerome. Thank you so much. And I thank Sister Annie Bell for the opening prayer. And I thank all of y'all who have been so special tonight, those here in person and those who are on live streaming. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. No more questions? No more questions. Sister Vivian Melton brought this in. She wants you all to know that you can get some free books and CDs as you leave. All right? No other questions. Thank you again. Thanks, everybody. We'll have prayer by Reverend Cynthia Smith, please. Thank you, Reverend Smith. Thank you so much. God bless all of y'all.
Let us pray. Most holy and gracious Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you, Lord, that we have been able to come together this evening and to receive information that each one of us will be able to use, because we know one thing's for sure, Lord, unless you come again, we will all have a turn at a date of expiration and transition. So we thank you for this forum tonight. We thank you for Attorney Bryant. We thank you for Sister Mary Smith. And we thank you, God, for this academy and the information that we've received every night. Father God, we ask that you would bless each one of us as we travel to our various destinations. Allow us to arrive safely and for things to be in order when we get there. And we promise that we will give you the glory and honor because you alone are worthy. And it's in the name of Jesus that we thank you and say, until we meet again, amen and amen.
Thank you so much. Good night, everybody.